Okay, I feel like every freelancer has a disaster client story, and I'm going to share mine because it was traumatizing. Before I get into it, I have to kind of rewind a bit. So, I've been freelancing for almost 10 years now, and this was my first actual project. Like, not a project with like a family friend for like 20 bucks. It was an actual company, a multi-million dollar company that reached out to me. So just to give a little backstory here, back in 2017, I did a series of Disney princesses that ended up going viral. So it got a lot of attention. There was articles being written about it. It was crazy. I was completely unprepared for this because I was about a year graduated from art school. I was not making any money with my art. I was applying to full-time jobs, not getting anything. Like, I was not in a great place, and I was definitely not prepared for an opportunity like this. So that was kind of the first issue in the story, just to kind of paint the whole picture, pun intended. So this multi-million dollar company saw one of the articles that was written about my work, and they reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a project with us?" I nearly had a heart attack because I, first of all, didn't even believe that this was a real email. I just thought it was a spam or someone was pranking me. And I was Googling this person and making sure the email was actually real because I genuinely couldn't believe I was being reached out to by this company. And of course, I was like, yes, I have never actually worked with a real client before. In art school, we took a business class, but like I didn't really learn anything in it. We weren't really given many tools to prepare us for a moment like this. And I'm going to break down things that I did wrong so you can avoid this if a situation like this, which it probably will, will arise, so you can avoid it and handle it with confidence and handle it completely different than the way I did. And I think it's really important to share this story because this project almost made me quit freelancing entirely. When I first started, I felt like all these successful artists that were making it and doing amazing things weren't really talking about how their job actually works, mistakes they made, looking out for other artists. And I really want to just put this out there to say, hey, I made a bunch of mistakes. Here's what not to do, and here's what to do so you can feel better equipped than I did back when this happened. So rewinding back to getting this email in my inbox, I was freaking out. I can still imagine the excitement and the nerves and the just pure joy that I felt inside. It was incredible because it felt like the validation I needed to prove everybody wrong, essentially. You know, your whole life as a creative, you're told that being an artist, you'll never make any money, you probably won't find success. And so something like this just felt like, yes, I told you I could do it. This is it. Watch me be amazing. This is like the first of many amazing things. Yes. Or so I thought, right? I was just hungry at this point because I had not worked with a client. I'm desperate to make money, to work and be a successful artist. I am dying for this. So I'm ready to blow them out of the water with this project. And I, of course, immediately say, yes, I am absolutely interested in doing this. Would love to hear more details about this project. And this multi-million dollar company, like most big companies, will ask you, okay, what is your price for the scope of this project? And the scope of this project was a few character drawings that would be used within their licensing department on coloring books and different products. And they sent over a contract and an NDA for me to sign. This was the first thing that I wasn't taught in art school either. I'm being told, okay, you draft up your own contract, and it's this, you know, measly 2-page thing that you send over. But no one told me that the big companies send their own contracts. So do I still send my contract? But I'm reading through with this. It seems really confusing. But you know, they know what they're talking about, right? So I sign it. I don't send over my contract. And that was my first mistake. And it wasn't a mistake that I didn't send over my contract, But this is where I should have really looked at the fine print of this contract and seen what the scope of the project was, and make sure that the contract is written out essentially to protect me as well. I mean, they're looking out for themselves, right? They want to make sure that they're covered, but nothing really is protecting me in this contract. And that is where I didn't feel empowered to be like, hey, in my contract, I usually put this revision clause where after 3 revisions, I charge X amount. I just signed their contract, just kept quiet. I did not want to rock the boat because I thought if I said anything, sent anything, I would lose this project. So I was like, shut up. So when they asked me, how much would this be? Mind you, again, this is my first real project, right? I don't know how to price jack shit. I don't know how to price anything. The most I got paid for a commission was, I think, $100 at this point. So I've never done a bigger scale project. It's always been personal commissions, family, friends, cousins, random, like not even that many, honestly. It was, I was charging like $40 to $100, and they were being used for different things for personal use. So when a big company comes to me and says, this is going to be used on a product that we're selling all over the world, I have no idea how to price that, right? And so I'm asking different mentors of mine of, well, what do I price? And no one really gave me an answer. They were just kind of like, well, what's the lowest that you would go for that? And I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know because I've only charged $40 to $100 for a commission. That's definitely not what I was supposed to do for this, which I didn't. I was going back and forth on this, really struggling with this. I tried to be like, hey, what's your budget for this? And they're like, well, what's your typical range? And then we'll let you know. So it was this kind of cat and mouse game that I've now come to realize is par for the course of working with clients. They usually keep it pretty close to the vest on what their budget is because they usually know creatives will underprice themselves. That's unfortunately just the truth. And this company definitely was waiting for me to lowball them, which of course I did. I ended up really thinking about this, and I charged them $400 for this project. And I'm being open about that number because I feel like no one ever really talks about the numbers that they're charging with things. And a project like this, I didn't really understand the scope of how much money they were going to be making from that being sold in stores. I wasn't considering it. I was only really considering, I've only charged $40 to $100 before, and $400 compared to that sounds really good. So there wasn't really much thought process between that number. I kind of pulled it out of thin air, and the company automatically was like, perfect, great, awesome. Yeah, 400 works for us. Of course it does, because it is so low. Not only was it low, and I think hindsight being 2020, looking back on that, I think by pricing myself so incredibly low, I looked very amateur. And I think that was almost planting this little like psychological seed in the company's head that I was amateur and not a professional, which, to be fair, I really was. But my price definitely reflected that. And I feel like when you price yourself that low for something that is going to create tens of thousands of dollars for them, you are saying my work doesn't hold a lot of value. I don't hold a lot of value. And so they almost might question that a little bit of, oh God, where did we find this girl again? Who is this? So looking back, I have no clue if that's actually their thought process, but I think if I was going to put myself in their shoes, I would think that. Another reason I was pricing myself so low for this was I was terrified of losing this job. This is a big company. I'm like, okay, I'll quote low for this one, and it's just going to open doors to so many opportunities. It didn't. I was really pricing myself out of fear, which is something that you should never do. You should be pricing with confidence. And that's just something that I hadn't acquired yet. And that's something that does take time to get, and it feels uncomfortable to price, and it feels uncomfortable to negotiate sometimes. And those things come with time, and you're going to make mistakes. However, pricing out of fear gets you into a lot of trouble. So we're already starting off to a rough start. I felt in my gut, I knew I was pricing myself low, but I'm like, you know what? This is so cool. I don't even care. I would do this for free. And I genuinely would. But the project started. And what I was told when the project began was it was a tight turnaround. This would really only take about 1 week. And I was like, great. So $400 for a week of work sounds good to me, I think. I'm 22 years old at the time, 23. I was like, yeah, awesome. And again, this is where in the contract, not having any type of revision clause allows a client to really take advantage of the situation. And I'll tell you what happened here. We began the project. They had this rough idea of what they wanted, and they were almost still in the conceptual phase of it. So they were really wanting me to create different concepts so they can start looking at what direction they wanted to go to. So it wasn't really this like concrete, hey, we want you to do this for this in this color palette and whatever. It was not like that at all. They were kind of like, we don't really know. We just kind of want these characters and just create something. Like, let us know, which is fine. I've had many clients that aren't really sure what direction they want to go to. However, again, the price is in the back of my head of, oh, okay, well, they said it's only got to take a week. So I guess these things just like go really fast, right? So the project began. We were doing revisions after revisions. They were kind of going back and forth being like, we kind of want to go in this direction. They're like, actually, we kind of like that first direction first. And I'm going back and forth. I am working day and night on this. And on one hand, I'm so excited because I'm hungry for this. I haven't worked this hard since I was in art school. Like, it felt like a project that I was working on all night, and it was for a final, and that, you know, that art school thing where it's just like everything feels so crazy hard and there's a lot of work, but you also kind of love it. That's what it felt like. So on one hand, I felt really awesome that I'm like, oh my God, I'm like a working artist right now. This is so cool. And on the other hand, as the revisions started to keep coming in, that week turned into 2 weeks, turned into 3 weeks, turned into 4 weeks. And what I originally agreed upon was that 1 week of work for $400. And now we've gone on for 4 weeks. So really, I'm just making $100 a week on this project. And we're still going back and forth and back and forth. And it is becoming a nightmare. And I am really upset with myself, and I'm starting to just feel that feeling of being excited and being like, yeah, this is awesome, started to turn into self-doubt of they hate everything I'm doing. I completely undercharge myself and I look like a fool. And I was just getting by the day more and more upset of like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is horrible. And I suck at this. I suck at drawing. I suck at business. I was starting to spiral with this project. Looking back, I see the initial issue was with the contract. I didn't feel empowered to negotiate with their contract to say, hey, this all looks great, but these are clauses in my own contract, because in the contract that I had that I made in art school in my business class had a clause with revisions. And if we went above 3 revisions, I would start charging hourly. And that would have been awesome, because if I had negotiated with them to say, hey, if we go above these revisions or we go past this 1 week deadline, I'm going to charge X amount hourly. And I would have felt really good about that. And the project could just keep on going and I just keep working on it and it'd be no problem. But it felt like because I didn't have that clause in their contract that I would have had to negotiate for, I felt like I was just bleeding money at this point, which I was. That's when I learned one of the biggest lessons in freelancing is boundaries are not optional. Boundaries do not make you look difficult. They make you look professional. And because I had zero boundaries and I was essentially just being like, walk all over me and I'm charging $2, they did. And I actually ended up not working with them again. And the work I did was great and they actually really liked it. I honestly think part of it, and I could be totally wrong, maybe they did hate my work, I don't know, was I looked amateur. And I was never going to do that again, even though I did. In that moment, it felt like I was at this crossroads of either I'm giving up now or I am not doing this again. I am approaching this in a different way. These are the lessons I learned and the ones that I wanted to share with you. So if you're ever in this situation, you can avoid it and handle it in a confident, clear way so you don't feel these feelings and go through this experience the same way I did. One, always have a contract, whether it is a huge company like this one or it's a small business or one person. Have a written contract. You should have a contract for yourself that protects you and lays out all the information you need to make you feel secure. And if you're working with a big company, they're going to supply their contract. And you're going to need to look over and see if there's any clauses about revisions or things that protect you as an artist. Because of course, their contract's going to be looking out for them. So don't feel awkward or ashamed to renegotiate a contract with them. Be like, hey, this is in my contract, or send over your contract to them. Be like, hey, I need these clauses put into this contract and can't wait to work on this. That makes you look secure and professional, and it makes you feel like with the project, you are protected. Lesson 2 is, and this kind of goes off of the contract, is define the revisions. Because I feel like with all of the really big companies I have worked with, revisions is something that always comes up. And a lot of these projects either drag on or things change down the line because there's so many cooks in the kitchen when you're working with a big company. There's a lot of different teams on this. And so you're almost like not the bottom of the totem pole, but you're further down waiting to hear what the creative director says and the design team and all. There's a lot of people that are involved. So changes happen a lot, and revisions are very, very common. So you want to make sure that you have revisions defined clearly, whether it is you do 3 revisions that are built into your flat rate or day rates, and anything extra is going to be extra fees. So once those revisions start rolling out, you're not feeling like you're bleeding money. This also goes with set an end date. And this is similar to revisions because a lot of times, especially with big companies, there will be this end date that they start just pushing back and back and back. And you think a 1-week project, like the one that I did for my first project, ended up being a month long. Again, you start bleeding money. And if your revision clause kind of covers this where you just charge hourly, then, it's kind of like one and the same. But if something goes past your end date, you could also add an extra fee for that as well. These are just things to consider depending on the client and the project, just to make sure that you are covered and feeling good. You also have to get comfortable saying no and standing up for yourself. I think a lot of creatives don't want to rock the boat and feel that sense of fear I was talking about earlier, where we're afraid to lose a project. But if a client is lowballing you or asking for things that you did not originally agree upon, you're allowed to say no. These are boundaries. It is not personal. It is business. You have to understand you're working with a business too. So they're not getting their feelings hurt. They're seeing what they can do to get the best return on investment. So you have to think for yourself as well. You're not hurting anyone's feelings. I feel like artists get so sensitive about things. Sticking up for yourself is not being mean. And I wish someone told me that earlier because I was always feeling that way. But when you're not sticking up for yourself, again, you look unprofessional. You look like a student artist. And we really want to get you feeling empowered and confident. And that draws clients in. That makes them feel like they're in good hands working with you. And even though these rules might seem like a no-brainer, a lot of freelancers skip them because they're afraid that their client will say no or walk away. And you have to also accept that that might be a possibility, but you also don't want to take on projects where you're being taken advantage of, because that feeling of being taken advantage of by a company made me want to quit. And it wasn't worth it. That feeling is not worth it. And even though that project was traumatizing for me, it was such a huge lesson, because I could have just thrown the towel in and been like, you know what? I suck. I can't do this. I am not cut out for this. They hate me and this is a disaster. But it really taught me so much about standing up for myself and figuring it out, and also making mistakes and being okay with making those mistakes. I think that's another part of freelancers and artists feel like they have to show up perfectly. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. There's going to be projects like the one that I encountered where you're undercharging yourself and you're just like the whole time like, oh my God, what did I do? That's par for the course. You know, you want to feel as equipped as possible, but also be kind to yourself when you do make those mistakes. Now, every client I work with, especially big companies, we go through our contract together and negotiate the clauses and things that I need to be in there to protect me and have me work to the best of my ability to bring them the idea and concept to life in the best way. And ever since I've done that and I've created these strong boundaries, my clients come back for more and more. They value me because I value myself. This situation of feeling like I had no idea what I was doing, I had no roadmap, no sense of what the hell I should be charging at all for anything, is exactly why I created my course, First Day Freelance. I feel like a lot of creatives, illustrators, designers are ill-equipped when they enter into the workforce, and they get taken advantage of and they give up, or they're just like, I'm not cut out for this. And it's not because they are not qualified to do the work. It's they just don't have the tools and the roadmap that they need to feel like they can succeed. And that's really the driving force of why I created my online course, to go through all of the mistakes that I've made and give them actionable tools and resources they need to feel strong and equipped and confident, being okay with making mistakes, but also valuing themselves. That feeling of confidence and value is going to give you momentum to just keep moving forward. I want to hear from you. If you've ever had a client, whether it's a big company or a small business or a person that was just a nightmare to work with, or you can relate to any of these points, let me know the story down below and what happened, what you learned from it. It can definitely help other artists. I think if we just open the floor to conversation about this instead of feeling ashamed about it, it would make us feel better. Maybe it would just make me feel better. So I'm like, guys, did you go through this too? Or is it just me? So remember, on your next project, put yourself first, charge what you're worth, and make sure your contract is looking nice. I will see you in the next one. Bye.